Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon, the game that actually got me into the Luigi's Mansion series. I have a lot of memories of this one, and it is the most nostalgic Luigi's Mansion game for me, but it is also my least favorite. But then I saw that it was coming back in the June Direct of 2023. The game was flawed due to being on the 3DS, and the fact that it was coming to the Switch with those gorgeous HD remastering, there was so much potential. Though it didn't look nearly as good as Luigi's Mansion 3, known for being one of, if not the best looking Switch game, they still had a whole year left of development that could polish the game even more. The Super Mario RPG remake looked fabulous, and it was only releasing 5 months after the Direct. Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door coming out 8 whole months after it got revealed in September that year, so this game taking longer to release means they still have more time to make it look even better. It's going to look great! What is this? I know this is just a remaster, unlike RPG and Thousand Year Door being full-on remakes, but come on man, you had a whole year to make it look as good as those games, and you chose not to? Man, Nintendo was cooking with the remakes and remasters, and this is what you give to us? It can't be that bad. Maybe I'm just a bit too harsh. After I beat it, I watched a technical review of the game that shows off what the remaster truly does, and though it made me realize that it's not as bad as I originally thought, it still could have been loads better. But I'm going to talk about the technicalities to truly see what the re-release improves over the original.
Huh?
First off, the frame rate. After I beat the remaster, I returned to the original version to see how it ran, and at first I thought it ran better, but it actually doesn't. The original version had an uncapped frame rate, which made it look higher than 30 FPS at times, but while also dropping below it. That is when a lot of stuff was on screen. 2 HD runs at a capped 30 FPS, so all of the frame drops are now gone. The game could have easily ran at 60 FPS on Switch, but it just doesn't, which is honestly a big disappointment, but it's still an improvement overall. And unfortunately, the game doesn't even load faster either, which is something I was hoping for, but ended up not being a thing. Next up we have the texture quality. That was one of the first things I noticed when this game got revealed in 2023. The textures look significantly better, and they added so much more detail than the original version. The most noticeable being on Luigi himself. His overalls are filled with beauty. One of the other first things I noticed was the polygon count being significantly higher. Since the Switch is loads more powerful than the 3DS, the polygon count is much higher. The characters no longer looking blocky and polygonal, and now look nice and round. And there were some added animations too that further polished the game more. But unfortunately, they removed the face Luigi makes when he runs. I remember absolutely loving the way how they made it look like Luigi's running in fear, but now he just looks sad when he runs. And of course, the resolution. The original version being on the 3DS, the resolution didn't look good at all. This remaster literally has HD in the title. Yeah, this game's resolution was boosted up to a clean 1080p image. How clean we talking? Probably the best I've ever seen on the Switch. Despite most Switch games being in 1080p, a majority of them struggle with anti-aliasing, making them still look slightly more pixely. Luigi's Mansion 2 HD has some of the best, if not the best anti-aliasing I've ever seen on the Switch. It was the first thing I noticed when I first played this game. Everything is nice and smooth and isn't pixely at all. And yeah, this game did a lot more than I thought with remastering the game, and the changes are actually pretty great. But it still could have looked significantly better. If it looked as good as Luigi's Mansion 3, that'd be a dream come true. But unfortunately that isn't the case. I understand that this is a remaster and is still trying to retain the original's art style, but it could have been so much better. But that's on the visual side of things. We haven't even begun with the other stuff that this game offers. What? That's it? All you bring is updated visuals? No new content or anything like that? Well, there is just one small thing that this game adds, and that's the controls. The controls are now pretty dang good with the inclusion of the right stick. I thought the original controlled pretty nicely on 3DS. Not great, but nothing for me to think that was genuinely bad. But the inclusion of the right stick is a very welcome addition, and makes the game control very smoothly.
Ho ho! Yeah, 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 yeah,
But outside of controls, there's literally nothing new the game adds, which is a very big disappointment. There was so much they could have added or changed that the original struggled with, like how all the levels are mission-based rather than exploring them freely like how the first game did. And though this game was updated pretty greatly with the visuals, there are some things that weren't changed, like how the windows just having undetailed versions of what's on the other side since the 3DS wasn't powerful enough to display both. They didn't polish or change those at all, but it's something I don't really care about. And I noticed that this remaster actually includes new glitches. There were only 2 I could find, but please let me know if you find more. The song that's supposed to play in the library didn't play at all when it was supposed to when I first walked into it.
Huh? Huh?
And the first thing I noticed when you clear a mission in the remaster is that when the screen goes black and the monitor shows up, the lab music plays for some reason. It never did this in the original version, so why is it playing now? I have no clue. Also, they didn't even bother fixing the random freezes some characters do when reading dialogue. They still just freeze for no reason, with no animation. They didn't bother about fixing that either. And yeah, that's all the remaster brings. Though it could have been stupidly, and I mean stupidly way better, the stuff that they did change was still nice. And I was able to finally 100% complete this game, something I never did on the original due to sucking at finding the gems. Sometimes I would always go back to Dark Moon after beating it just to find those dang gems, but I never could find them all. I used a guide to collect them all in 2HD, thinking I'd have the same issue, but some of the locations weren't as complicated as I thought. So once I reached the final mansion, I decided to not use the guide and find them all myself, and shockingly I did. I guess I was just really stupid as a kid. Some of them are in clever spots, and though I never got them all, I was actually close in the original version. I thought I got a 3-star rank in all the levels in the original version, but shockingly I didn't whenever I returned to it. I think it's most likely because by the time I was going for all the 3-star ranks, the first Luigi's Mansion Remake released on the 3DS, and I played that instead, and never returned to Dark Moon at all. Yeah, the first game is the main reason why I never returned to Dark Moon until it got remastered. But now that I'm talking about the remake, let's compare it to 2HD. The 3DS remake has much better visuals than the original despite the 3DS and GameCube's hardware not being that different. It has a 2-player mode with Luigi. It has a secret S rank at the ranking score at the end of the game, which I actually didn't know the remake added, and thought you could just get an S rank in the original version too. You can now replay bosses and other portrait ghosts in EGA's gallery. The game now has amiibo support where your 3 different amiibos have different effects that make the game easier. The hidden mansion is now significantly harder, something that was locked in the European version of the original game. You can now use the strobe bulb from Dark Moon if you're more familiar with that game's controls. You now have separate missions to complete that adds a lot more replayability to the game, and many other extra details that the remake brings that further polishes an already amazing experience. That is how you make a good remake. And all of those changes were for the fair price of $40. That, my friend, is a deal. Meanwhile, 2HD is just design changes and upgrades, no new content at all. So surely that would make it at a fair price, right? Nope. $60. The original version launched at $40. So if you still have the 3DS and still want this game, just buy it on the 3DS. 2HD is overall better, but so little changes for too much isn't worth it. Speaking of which, I still haven't covered the game itself, just the remaster. So let's do that now.
Oh, yeah! Yes! Yes!
The game takes place in Evershade Valley, a place full of abandoned mansions and even friendly ghosts. Thanks to the power of the Dark Moon, these ghosts live in peace, and are rather chill. In the intro cutscene, we see Egad working on some stuff in his lab. There, he's accompanied with friendly ghosts who like to have fun and even help around. But then, we see a shadowy figure that doesn't even hide who it is. Yeah, it's King Boo. He used the power of his crown to shatter the Dark Moon, and the shards fall all over Evershade Valley. The ghosts immediately become hostile and destroy the place. Egad thankfully was able to escape to his bunker before they started attacking him. Meanwhile, we see Luigi taking a nap in his chair. Now I want to pause here for a second to admire the details that are in this part of the cutscene. Luigi's house is one of the mansion ranks that you can get in the first game, this one specifically being the one you unlock when you complete the game with a D rank, meaning that Luigi canonically got a D rank in his last game, and not the superior A rank, or S rank in the 3DS version. And when we peek inside Luigi's house, we can see the map that was in the intro of the first game. It's small stuff like these that I just adore in a game. Resuming to the cutscene, Luigi's ancient prehistoric TV starts to static. Luigi wakes up from this and was just about to turn it off when BAM! Egad calls Luigi from his TV. He asks Luigi to help him out since he helped Egad in the first game. Egad rips Luigi out of his own living room thanks to his new invention, the Pixelator. And this is how Luigi gets from place to place in the game. Luigi gets pixelated and now ends up in Egad's bunker. Egad tells Luigi what's going on, and that he needs to restore the Dark Moon pieces or else the ghost will destroy Evershade Valley. So he gets Luigi to help since he's the best and only Ghostbuster he knows. Throughout the game, we eventually learn more details about what King Boo is planning. We learn that the Boos are here too, making everything turn invisible. We see them carrying a sack with a painting in it that we eventually learn is Mario. And finally they see that King Boo is behind it all, and him breaking the Dark Moon and even controlling the other ghosts of Evershade Valley will help him conquer the world with his power. So that's the story, and I honestly really like it. It's simple, but it's great for a game like this.
Oh. Okie dokie. Oh.
The game's controls are pretty dang good for a 3DS game, but they're not as good as the first game. In the first game, you catch ghosts as if you were fishing according to the manual. You tilt the control stick to the opposite of where the ghost is facing, but you don't just hold it. You have to wiggle it for extra damage, but you can do even more damage if you also tilt the C-stick. Doing this makes catching ghosts really satisfying, but since Dark Moon was on the 3DS, controls like this wouldn't really work. Sure, when the game first got remade, it still used that style of controls, but with the C-stick being mapped to motion controls on the original 3DS designs, it wasn't nearly as good feeling as the GameCube version. So in Dark Moon, instead of wiggling the control stick in the opposite direction, you now just have to hold it, and if you do it successfully, you can charge up a meter. Once it's full, you do a lot of damage once you press A. The more treasure you gain, the more you get to level up the damage you deal from the meter to do a ginormous amount of damage. I wouldn't say this is more fun than the controls of the first game, but it's still very satisfying to do. Also, earlier I mentioned the stroll bulb and how they brought it back in the remake of the first game. That's this game's version of stunning ghosts. In the first game, you just had to shine your flashlight and they get stunned. Then you can suck them up. In Dark Moon, you have this stroll bulb, a device that lets you charge a ginormous beam of light that stuns ghosts in the same way. It makes catching a horde of ghosts much easier and much more fun. Yeah, the controls are really nice, and the gameplay overall seems to be really good so far. Now we just have to see the level design, and this is where things get interesting. Dark Moon is filled with a bunch of puzzles to solve. The first game had some puzzles here and there, but it wasn't anything big. But Dark Moon? They're much more clever. But finding all the gems is where the real puzzle challenge is at. I already talked about this briefly, but man, these gems are stupidly well hidden. Some are in pretty easy to find locations, but others will require you to have a brain that's never been exposed to brain rot. The game already has some puzzles in the beginning, but it's not until you get the dark light device when things get interesting. This thing can make invisible objects reappear again, and this is where the boosts come in. They're responsible for turning things invisible. The dark light device can also be upgraded, and the more it's upgraded, the longer you can use it without it overheating. And man, I miss being able to use it without it overheating in Luigi's Mansion 3. That change was an incredible one. Now the cutscenes. For most people, including myself, this is the main highlight of the game. The characters are filled to the brim with personality and are super entertaining to watch. The first game introduced Luigi's character to be more cowardly, but Dark Moon adds to that by making Luigi very lovable. This is where Luigi's whole character truly began, and is where I officially started to love Luigi as a character more. The ghosts do some funny stuff too, but I'll get back to that later. And of course, Polterpup, the adorable ghostly dog that just wants to play and often gets into trouble.
No, bad dog.
Instead of there just being one mansion to explore, there's 5. And it's honestly so much more fun to explore multiple rather than just one. You got the gloomy manor, you know, just your average spooky house. The haunted towers, 2 very tall buildings that were built beside a ginormous tree that nature infested due to the original owners being gardeners. The old clockworks, an abandoned clock factory that was built above an ancient tomb full of mummies. The secret mine, a small little house that was built on a mountain that is actually home to a ginormous mine. And finally, the treacherous mansion, a ginormous mansion that was home to an explorer who traveled the globe. This mansion has exhibits and even a chamber full of medieval knight statues that just underneath the place. All these locations make exploring the mansions feel so great. And of course, the music. Though not nearly as iconic as the first game's music, there are a couple songs that are worth a listen, but others are kind of forgettable if you ask me. I do like how all the mansion themes are just remixes of one song to fit the atmosphere, which is really cool.
I do it.
My biggest complaint is the fact that everything is mission based, meaning that once you clear the main objective, you're brought back into Egad's lab. Well, first it has to load. Okay, now you're in his lab. Read some dialogue. Select a new mission. Wait for it to load again. Okay, now you can get back to exploring. And of course, Egad calls you a lot through this game, but it was never anything I found annoying. And now the ghosts. That's right, the ghosts themselves are flawed too. Mainly because they were changed a lot compared to the first game. In the first game, the ghosts had these unique yet goofy designs, and the portrait ghosts having a lot more of a humanoid look. And then there's Dark Moon, that does give them unique designs and all, but they're no longer ominous looking and are only just goofy. The greenies laugh and giggle a lot, while also wielding whatever they can find. The slammers use their mighty strength to slap a shockwave at you. The hiders, hiding in random furniture, but these ones are actually my favorite for starring in the best cutscene in the game. The sneakers, loving to turn invisible and sneak up on you from behind. The poltergeist, being a very funny sounding ghost with this And though the ghosts lost their eeriness from the first game, I always love to see characters be filled with personality, these ghosts being no exception. But overall, the ghosts being less creepy and only having goofiness be their personality is still a downgrade, and is what some fans of the first game really disliked about this game. And of course, the bosses. The first boss was actually pretty cool, where you use stuff around you to light the spider webs and knock the possessor ghosts out the spider. And yes, the possessor ghosts. They're able to possess anything around them, and are the holders of the Dark Moon pieces. The first boss was cool, but the second boss was just waiting for him to stop jumping. The third boss just being an enemy gauntlet. The stupid freaking ice monster that I hate in the fourth boss. This giant knight that would be so cool if he had more attacks. This big boss ghost that is kind of like Boo losses from the first game, but train. But I do like the idea of locking the Boos up in the train. The setup for this fight was incredible, outside of the main story and all. The giant knight fight took place in another dimension due to going in a portal that King Boo summoned, and EGAD was going to try and pixelate Luigi out of there after he defeated him, but it unfortunately didn't work and only the last Dark Moon piece did. But Luigi ended up being where King Boo was, and King Boo explains his big plan for ruling the world after taunting Luigi with Mario. But the fight itself is just pretty alright. I do recall always returning to this fight when I'd replay this game back then, but it's just an alright final boss. Just get those spike balls on his head, run away in this chase sequence that's actually pretty fun, and rinse repeat. And here, the ending finally plays out.
Oh! Ho ho! Yes! Yeah. I did it!
Luigi frees Mario, the Dark Moon is restored, and the ghosts become friendly again. This final cutscene is so charming, and it's nice to see that Mario also got an amazing overall detail like Luigi. And yeah, that's Luigi's Mansion 2 HD, and I don't know how to feel about it. It was so nice to finally return to this game after several years, but they just could have changed so much, and yet they didn't. Most of the flaws from the original game are still here, and they didn't bother about fixing it. But it's enough for me to say that 2 HD is the best way to experience the game. But as a game, I'd give it a 7.8 out of 10. As a remaster, 6 out of 10.
Oh.